Hello, I'm Frank Stanisci of Candid Frank Live, where you'll find us airing our views here on the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on Candid Frank Live, joining me is Aaron William Freeland. Aaron, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing relatively well, Frank. How about yourself?
I'm okay. Well, while we were off air there, Aaron did a little math thing. He was trying to calculate. We were talking about the carbon tax, which is on April Fool's Day. It will become, it'll become what what it's going to be, whatever that is. I don't want to assume anything other than to suggest that a lot of people are up in arms about the carbon tax. And Aaron did a calculation, not to get into any numbers, specific numbers, but generally speaking, because I guess I don't have the wherewithal to do it. I haven't given it any thought enough. But Aaron was able to calculate. He basically said the carbon tax is pretty much covered, considering I get when I pay my taxes. In other words, it becomes a benefit for paying taxes. So you get the carbon tax rebate. And Aaron would, to put it just as simply as possible, Aaron would have to do a lot of driving to use up the carbon tax benefit that he gets. And I assume that's the same for me because I drive even less. And I get a carbon tax rebate, which is one way of saying I pay taxes. Um, I kind of, there's an interior side of this thing that had just occurred to me now while having the conversation, is that in essence what the federal government's doing is saying if you pay your taxes, you get this. So it's a bit of a carrot that you get because you pay your taxes. Am I inferring too much?
I wouldn't necessarily say that you're inferring too much. I'm firmly of the opinion that if you do the right thing and you pay your taxes, and not necessarily that you be a good boy, but you know, i- i- at the end of the day, you will reap a benefit for it. So, it's just like contributing to the RRSP. It at the end of the day, uh, while you may not necessarily like the fact that you have less money on your paycheck, you're going to be getting something back from it come tax time.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
That's the aim. That's the hope. And maybe it does work out that way. And if it does, that's great for everybody. Um, the carbon tax, it does. Sorry, we're getting off topic here. We're not doing the what we came here to do, but it just because we had that conversation. The carbon tax is something that's easily attackable from people, much like for those of you that are old enough, and some of you are, because if you're in middle aged, you'll remember what happened when the GST was introduced. And if you remember correctly, the conservatives, the progressive conservative party, were totally against it. They were in power for something like 8 years after it was initiated. They never took it out.
No, they never did, which was what was interesting to me, right? Like you had a majority, you had the opportunity to completely remove the GST, or as it's now known, the harmonized sales tax, and nothing
And if
happened.
and if you don't know who was in power at that time, I think his last name was Mulroney.
I believe you're correct. He was a great musician. He happened to play a great Meech Lake accordion.
Well, anyway, my condolences, and every leader, we should respect our leaders. When a leader is elected, we have an obligation to be respectful for one very important reason, and that is it affirms democracy. It affirms the idea that what our country is based on. I know there's going to be people. There's always people who are unhappy. But the whole point of democracy is that we all get a chance to discuss, compare ideas, listen to those ideas, listen to explanations as to why those ideas are best. And we hear it from from far, wide, deep, shallow, every corner of the country. That's the democracy, can come from anywhere. And then an election happens and people are voted for based on people's interpretation which government or which party is going to at least promise to do something that you can vote for. So that if your vote doesn't count towards the winner, maybe not this time, but it will maybe next time. And that's the beauty of democracy. You can't always have your way. And sometimes one has to learn what compromise is all about. And I think the people who don't like democracy, by actions that they take or by words that they use, they don't like compromise. That's one thing I'm going to tell you, this old man's going to say to you, that anybody who doesn't like democracy or complains about it incessantly, regardless of who wins the election, it's not about whether democracy is good, bad, or whatever, or indifferent. It's about the fact that you're never happy. You should maybe ask yourself a question: why are you always unhappy?
I can't speak for everybody here, but I do know that um, if it's going to cost me an extra 3 cents a liter, but I get $478 back from the government, um, that 3 cents a liter goes into $478, 15,933 times. I'm not ever going to buy $15,933 or liters, sorry, worth of gasoline. That $478 that I get back every year, I'm okay with that.
Divide it by 50 liters. Divide it by 50, that number.
Okay.
And then you'll
Um,
have how many tanks of gas you can buy. I think people understand that even better.
yep. Well, let's do
And,
that.
and most cars, the average car is 50 liters, right?
That's 318 tanks full of gas, unless you're filling up pretty
Oh,
much
that's
every day.
almost a tank every day.
I don't know anybody who drives. My Jeep, for example, gets 880 kilometers per tank full. I don't think I will ever drive 880 kilometers in a day, with the exception of traveling to Philadelphia for Fan Cup, and even then, the truck is parked for 3 days while I play lacrosse. So
Well, it's the same reality that kicks in when you actually do the math, and thank you for doing the math. When you actually do the math and you figure out statistically, factually, right? You figure something out and you compare apples with apples as opposed to comparing apples with oranges and plums, right? So here's the other example, because this is one of our favorites. This is one of Aaron's and my favorites, and I'm still not letting go of vaccinations. I still think they're a good idea, and I'll use another example for those of you that would bother to make the math. That at a point at the end, when 85, I think it was, we got to about 85 or 87% in Canada that were vaccinated, Aaron, for COVID, something
hmm
like that, right?
yep, approximately.
And in the hospitals, though, and what the unvaccinated are the ones that don't want to get vaccinated, they said, well, why, if vaccinations are so good, why are there as many people who've been vaccinated in the hospital as people who weren't?
Yeah.
So you got to do some math,
Mm,
folks. The math works if you pay attention to it and you do the math. Do the math. It works. 1 plus 1 does equal 2. And anybody who tells you it doesn't and says it equals 3, give their head a shake. Give their head a shake. So yeah, so that was our political moment here. And I know I have a lot of friends who don't believe in getting vaccinated, and I respect your I I respect your decision because you have a right to make it. But I would hope that you would respect logic, facts, and things as well. And if you don't respect the facts as we understand them, if we like that, just that simple example I gave, right? If you're a non-vaxxer and you don't want to discuss what I just said, the numbers I just said, and you side on the issue where you say, well, as many people who haven't been vaxxed as people who have been vaxxed are in the hospital or dying, right? So it's You can believe what you want. You're more than entitled to. But I just believe a lot of people who don't believe in vaccinations. It's not about facts. It's about feelings.
And here's the other thing. I know some people will never be satisfied with Justin Trudeau. They would rather have Pierre Poilievre in power, and then that's fine.
Or
That's their
anybody else.
thing. Or anybody but Trudeau, which is the usual refrain when it comes to this sort of thing. But I mean, you have that right to have that opinion. That's cool, you know. But you're probably not going to change my mind. I have changed my vote based on the platform. I have changed political affiliations based on who I think is going to do the least amount of damage to my country as I see it. And I think all of us do this sort of thing. Um, but it is the way that politics is. If you would rather just have one person in power, there are several countries you could probably go to where you don't have to worry about politics and you don't have to worry about that. You know, I respect your right to have that opinion. It's just we're not going to get there this way. And going the route of the U.S., um, the way that America is trending right now is probably not the way that you want to go about it either.
It's more than the U.S., Aaron. That's the thing.
Well,
Right? It's
that's
more
true.
than the U.S. It's a worldwide shift. Since we're getting into sort of the political side of what we talk about, and I just believe, Aaron, the thing is that people are unhappy, and those people that are unhappy are deciding who the culprit is or what the culprit is, and they're behaving and acting based on those thoughts. But for me, it's about feelings. I truly feel the biggest thing that's wrong with um, our society, and I look around the world, and I honestly do believe this, and it's probably a horrible thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Is I think we have a world full of wimps, a bunch of pussies that can't handle figuring stuff out and actually accepting facts and being willing to critically think. We lack as a society, too many of us are unwilling to critically think. And there's two words there that speak to it. It's about critical. In other words, you can critique, if I can take, a word out of that, you can critique what you and others think. But if you can't critique what you yourself think, then you're in a silo. That's the definition of being in a silo, where it's impossible for you to think, and I'll use this term, which most people should understand, your inability to think outside the box that is limited by the inside of your head, that you can't think outside your own mind, you can't think outside your own world, you can't think outside your own friends, your own family, you just can't think outside. And we've got to learn to do that, folks, because people who sell BS are depending on you not being able to think critically. And I can listen to somebody who says Trudeau's a blah 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 blah. Okay, tell me why, and okay, and I'll listen to you, and maybe I won't vote for him. It. I'm not 100% sold on anybody, but I want to hear what people have to say when it comes to election time, because I want to practice what I'm preaching here. At the end of the day, the bottom line is I have no right to complain about how my democracy works if I don't vote. And even worse, if I vote because of my feelings, not because of what I've learned or tried to learn or know as facts that I can critically surmise and or believe, depending on where on the spectrum you want to be in that regard. But to actually think what's best for you and think it's so important, folks. We don't have an election coming soon. The Americans do. And in fact, a lot of the democracies in the world, Aaron, right now, there's like something like 60 or 80 elections coming up this year in democracies around the world.
Yeah, there's a lot of worldwide change that's going on. It's going to be impossible to resist. Things will change. The geopolitical face of the world is going to shift. Whether we like it or not. So it's up to us to be prepared. Read up on these platforms. Reading is tough. At the political platforms, reading those sucks. They are not fun to read, but at the same time, it will give you a better idea of where that party is trying to go. Election promises, every politician makes them. Like diapers, they're usually full of it. You know, just take
Well,
the time to
promises
go
are
through
what promises are, right?
it. Mhm.
Promises are you don't know what no amount of critical thinking is going to give you total insight into how promises end up, right? And
Yep,
that's
that's
why
very
you gotta
true.
keep track. You gotta keep track. Like, you have to pay attention, and this is what's wrong with every party, Aaron. It's every party has this problem, is that people pay attention to the promises, and if you can't deliver, right, then it becomes your party's problem. But here's something for you critical thinkers out there, if you wanna be a critical thinker. Figure out why they didn't deliver on what they promised. Make sure you know why they didn't deliver on what they promised. Is it because they lied, or is it because there were people out there who didn't want them to succeed in you know I'll use an example because you and I are paying a lot of attention to the American political system, because I don't have a comparison here in Canada. I wish I did, and maybe I should pay attention more. Maybe being a Canadian is a little harder to be. With the Americans, it's a little easier because it seems to be everywhere. But here's the thing: when you have the problem, the border problem that they have in the United States, they have a border problem there, and we hear about Republicans talking about people on the right saying they got to do something about it. They got to do something about it. They got to do something about it. So finally, you got a guy like Biden who says, "I want to get reelected. So if I want to get reelected, I have to prove I'm going to do something. And maybe it's time for me to do something about this." We can all agree or disagree that the Democrats were slow walking solutions at the border. We can all agree or disagree that Democrats thought that it's not a good idea, it won't be good for them if they do something about the border because they don't want to irritate a certain part of whom they believe supports them. Which all these things could be true. You decide, be the critical thinker. But the fact is that there was an agreement, and the agreement, there's nobody can deny, because during the president's speech, the guy that basically created the plan that they were trying to pass as far as the border is concerned was sitting there, and he agreed with Biden, and he said, yes, it's true that they did come up with a plan, that it was a very right wing inspired plan and law they wanted to pass, and it was the Republicans themselves that didn't do it. And it was because you have a politician staring you in the face going, nope, my election is more important than what's best for America. It's a fact. You don't have to think real hard. You don't really have to get into the weeds on this one. It's like it's in plain sight. And I guess what I'll say is that seems to be the biggest problem today, Aaron. It doesn't matter what happens, even if it's in plain sight. People refuse to put two and two together.
Math is hard. Math has always been hard. I am not a statistician. I am not a mathematician by any stretch of the term. But math it out. Um, I heard people complaining about the deficits that Trudeau is running, and when it's averaged out over the course of of the Canadian population, it works out to about $35 a person, which is a dinner out. It's not the end of the world. You can breathe. It's all going to be okay.
So to summarize, then, would you agree then that really the issue is, I referred to it as critical thinking versus feelings? Is that what
Facts
it comes
versus
down?
feelings.
Is that what it comes down to? Do you think?
I think it is a lot of people like to be upset. A lot of people like to be angry. It seems to be a default setting for a lot of folks is just to be angry at the world, and they make it their personality.
I,
It's a thing.
I agree, Aaron, that there are people who are angry, but I disagree that the implication there is that there actually are people, Aaron, who are dissatisfied honestly, who are unhappy honestly. Now they're just looking for somebody to blame for their misfortune. Whether, like being unemployed, Aaron, who do you blame if you're unemployed? Who do you blame if you don't have the money to feed your family? Who do you blame if you can't afford to have a home? The easiest thing for someone who isn't that person to say is, well, maybe they should work a little harder. And what I'll say is this, is that in some cases, some people can't work hard enough to make ends meet, just because of how much they get paid. In my final days of working, were not like my early days of working. I couldn't have a family when I first started working. Was too young anyway. But the point is that I didn't make enough money to do stuff. So, and I just ask you, as someone who has a decent job and who makes a decent living, I just say, just keep in mind that there are people out there who, through no fault of their own, not because they're not trying, not because they're not working hard or not looking for a way to work hard or figuring out ways to save money, because some people are blamed because, well, you spend money in places you shouldn't. I'm talking about the people who actually don't earn enough money to live. And that, to me, should be the people that we should all try to help. But it seems to scare people who have money, that if they help people who don't have money, they feel like they're going to have to give away something. It's that pie theory. It's that pie theory that if someone gets something that isn't there, then, if I let them have it, are they going to take it away from me? Are they going to, what they going to get, going to create a deficit in my life? I don't know. What do you think?
The only situation I can really liken this to is a CEO sitting at the table with 1,000 cookies, and he takes one cookie out of his pile and points to the worker, and then points to the foreigner and says, "He's coming for your cookie." It's not. It's not. It's not always. It's not always what you. The problem isn't always what you're pointed at, and it's very easy to miss the forest for the trees.
So essentially, what you're saying is that there's enough out there. You're speaking to the, well, I'll take it a step further because I'm trying to work with what you said. It's not a pie. This is the thing, folks. Like, it's not a pie that is limited to that pie, to that size of that pie. Because what you have to remember is that the more people there are, the bigger the pie. The more we generate, and it's in our best interests, to put it bluntly, that if there were no poor people in the world today, it wouldn't cost people who are rich. It wouldn't cost people who are middle of the road, and it wouldn't cost anybody who's fearful that they're living on the edge, because we create see, economies aren't based on it's if you make if a card let's simplify this. If they make 1,000 cars, the people who are working making those 1,000 cars are making whatever 1,000 cars making makes money, right? Whether it be union, non-union, but cost. But if you make 2,000 cars, you're still making the money you're making. But if you can sell that extra 1,000 cars, in other words, make sure that people are earning money, the guy at the Burger King is making enough money that he can buy that car, you're not hurting the person who's working at making cars, and so the economy is not, I'm not saying it's unlimited, but it's also something that grows. And within that growth, if we include people as part, in other words, if people are allowed to make enough to take part in the economy, when they buy stuff, I think, what the best example of this was? When they gave out checks for COVID, if you remember. Those people had money to spend. When they gave it to people who weren't making a lot of money, they spent all of it, and it helped create a foundation for the economy.
It genuinely did, and those who needed it the most used it.
Had no choice.
No,
They
unfortunately,
had no
because
choice.
capitalists decided now was the great time to charge more money per toilet roll, or
It
more money for PPE, or more money for necessities.
If you give somebody minimum wage, and please agree with us on this point, folks, if you're watching this point, folks. Minimum wage will not get you a house. It will not get you an opportunity to buy a mortgage, probably won't even get you an opportunity to buy a new car. You're going to have to buy a used car if you're on minimum wage. Now, if minimum wage goes up, do you think they're going to pocket that money, or do you think they're going to spend it?
And here's the flip side to that. Everybody's complaining that if minimum wage goes up, then prices of everything will go up. Um, Minimum wage is already $25 an hour in Europe. Their Big Macs are cheaper than here.
It's that's a red herring. It's just such BS. The like I said, um, giving people a livable wage. And when we talk about livable, well, what are the basics that people should? I hate. I don't want to use the word entitled because that's a dirty word. When we talk politics, when we talk politicians, when we talk parties, when we talk finance, as far as politics is concerned, entitlements is a bad word for a certain group of people. This is money people are getting for no reason. That's the way they see it, right? You know what I'm saying, right? So let's not use the word entitlement. Let's just, if you need to live, what are the basics that you need to live, Aaron?
I need a roof over my head. I need a job, and I need transportation to and from that job and
Well,
food.
you need a job that can afford to. You need a job that can afford to support itself. In other words, your vehicle thing, that you got to be able to go somewhere, and and then your personal needs are lodging, like you said, a roof over your head, food, enough food to have a decent diet. And if you're a family, let me ask you, folks, do you think if you have a family and you have a job, you should never go hungry? You should never worry about heating your home, living in a space which is comfortable, that your children should have the basics of life. And do you think maybe, would you refer to a basic of life, a vacation with your parents, a child being taken on a vacation? I'm not talking to, I'm not talking to an expensive vacation, but just getting away and having some fun. If you've ever been on vacation and you see, or you just go to the beach and you see the kids at the beach, don't you think they deserve a couple of those happy moments a year? So I don't think that's a basic need. It's not an entitlement. And if you can't afford that kind of stuff, what kind of world are we creating? You know? And on the other side of the spectrum, how much do you need? Do you need to have billions? Do you need to have a jet? Do you need to have more than one jet? Do you need to have more than 5, 6 homes? I'm not saying that people shouldn't have that, because if they earn it, it's good for them to have. Go ahead and have it. But I wouldn't say to you that you can't have as many homes as you want. And but I'd like you, if you're in that position, to ask yourself, don't you think somebody has the right to have enough food on their table? Do you think every child has an opportunity to live a decent life if their parents work hard? By definition, works hard. You tell me what works hard is. 2, 3 jobs, 120 hours a week. I don't think that's fair. I don't think, if somebody has to work 120 hours a day, have 3 jobs or whatever, to be able to feed their children or have a home, that's not the world that we should be thinking about. As an old man who's I've had my life, and most of my life, I had my working life. All I know is that I know how hard I worked. I know how hard I worked to have a home. I know how hard I worked so that my kids could go to Disney World every year. I worked really hard, but there's nothing that can replace the happiness that a child feels when they feel like they're being spoiled in a. I don't know if that's really, maybe spoiled again. This is like entitlement. I don't think it's really spoiling them. I think everybody's entitled to have a good time and dream and enjoy life.
No, I'm not in disagreement with you there, Frank.
So again, like I said, I didn't want to use the word entitlement because I think that's an evil word, or it's been made evil. I think it's people have a right to have their needs filled. And if they're willing to work really hard, there's no reason for them not to have their needs filled. And I think needs are also, a week vacation, whether it's just going to a beach somewhere, and your children never cold, never hungry, and never feeling. And this is the most awful thing that I can say from what I've learned from my life. The worst thing is that to have the kind of pressure that a parent has if they can't afford to put a roof on a kid's head, that they can't afford to feed their child every day, that they can't afford to feel like they have any security at all. That's an awful thing to put somebody through. And I'm referring, I don't want to hear from you people that go, well, they should work harder. I'm saying, I agree with you. People should work hard for what they have. But what's work hard? How much work do you want somebody to do to deserve a decent life?
It's all about balance.
Yeah. All right, let's do some sports stuff. That was fun. I'll give you the closing comments on that.
Uh, honestly, um, no child should ever go hungry. Adults shouldn't have to work two or three jobs. I know I worked three jobs going through university so I could pay for food and lodging and university myself. That's just what I did. But as a grown ass adult, you should be able to make enough money from one job that you should be able to afford room and board. You should be able to afford to feed and clothe your children and your family. And somewhere along the way, have a nice little vacation if you need to. It's the people that I think, to me, that are the most disheartening are the individuals who think that, no, you're just not working hard enough, or why should the taxes that I pay support anybody else? It's all about me. I've got mine. I don't care. Those people, to me, are the most disappointing, because when you're part of a society, it's a requirement that you work with the rest of that society. And I think that's what a lot of people tend to forget.
Yeah.
That's another offshoot entirely. We could spend hours discussing this sort of thing, Frank. But what do you got for us sports wise?
Let's go with the CFL first, and we'll talk
Okay.
about the Stamps, and they got themselves a linebacker.
They definitely did. There's actually quite a few pieces of news coming out of Stampederville. Um, First off, they did actually, I love the headline here: Stamps reel in linebacker Shahid Salmon. They've signed veteran American linebacker Shahid Salmon. Um, he was with the Ottawa Red Blacks from 2019 to 2022. He played 35 games for Ottawa and recorded 27 defensive tackles, including one for loss, 27 special team stops, four forced fumbles, one fumble recovery, one interception, and one knockdown. In 2022, Salmon was in uniform for all 18 games and made one start. He finished second on the Red Blacks with 15 special teams tackles, and also had 15 defensive tackles, including one for loss. He had signed with the NFL's Tampa Bay Bucks as an undrafted free agent in 2018, and had also spent time with the Birmingham Iron of the Alliance of American Football and the New Orleans Breakers of the USFL. In 2023 for the Breakers, he played 8 games and recorded 17 tackles. Following the merger of the USFL and the XFL into the United Football League, he was drafted by the Memphis Showboats. So there you have it. He's been around. He knows his job.
Yeah.
Um,
Can we assume then that he will obviously, when it comes to the receivers of the other team, he'll hook them before they run their trouts that they want?
Very well done, sir. I appreciate
Oh, that was terrible.
that.
How I get that one out there. It got out there. I'm sorry. It escaped. Escaped. I'm sorry. And then, of course, they added American Clarence Hicks as well. The Stampeders did.
Yeah, for those who have followed his career, Clarence attended training camp with the NFL's Cincinnati Bengals in 2022. In 2023, he played 10 games for the XFL's Seattle Sea Dragons and had 20 tackles and 2 sacks. He played 38 games over 3 seasons at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and was the first Team Conference USA All-Star linebacker for the Roadrunners in 2021. So he's again one of those guys who has a wealth of experience that the Stampeders can draw on, and definitely looks to their defensive game just that much better.
Well, the Stamps also have some help at quarterback now. They got a new quarterbacks coach.
Yep, Bo Baldwin is in as their new quarterback coach. Baldwin is going to be replacing Ryan Williams, who has accepted a position with the U.S. college team. Um, Baldwin's coaching resume includes 13 seasons over 2 stints at Eastern Washington University as offensive coordinator and quarterback coach for 4 years from 2003 to 6, and as head coach for 9 years from 2008 to 2016. Um, so he's going to be bringing a lot of stuff that he can draw on. His college experience, certainly with the way the game has been shifting and the way that the drafts and the combines have been going, will definitely give them a new look.
Elks also make a move. They bring back American defensive lineman Emeki Egbule.
So Egbule is returning to Edmonton following his release by the St. Louis Battlehawks at the UFL. He signed with the Elks in September of 23 and will make a CFL debut against the BC Lions in Week 16. That was last year. He would go on to play 3 games for the Green and Gold, recording 1 defensive tackle before being released in late October to pursue another opportunity down south. He played 3 seasons in the NFL, appearing in 32 games with the LA Chargers after being selected by the Chargers in the 6th round of the 2019 draft.
Well, let's go to F1. Liam Lawson has to wait in the wings because Daniel Ricciardo, however you say it, he's given 2 races to save F1's seat.
So this is an interesting story. While Ricardo was out with a broken wrist, Liam filled in, did a decent job so far. The problem that Daniel is having currently at this point of the season is Yuki Tsunoda has actually been the only one to earn points so far for the Visa Cash App Red Bull Racing team. So, uh, you know, he, it's been a difficult situation for him. After coming off the injury from last year, he's on a team that hasn't had a particularly good car for a very long time, and he's been expected to make a lot of it. Yuki Tsunoda, on the other hand, has a bit of an advantage because he's been driving those absolutely craptacular cars for the past few years. Um, the other thing here is that Liam Lawson, who's only 22, is actually seen within Red Bull Racing as the team's best option to partner with Max Verstappen once Sergio Perez's contract is up. So here we're looking at silly season coming up soon. Sergio Perez's contract is up. Sonoda's contract is up. Carlos Sainz's contract is up, and Danny Ricciardo's contract is up. So it's going to be a very interesting second half to the season. We'll have to see who lands where.
So tell me, Aaron, in the NBA, there's an issue that's come up, and it's a Raptor who falls under the category of concern, John Tay Porter. What are the odds that he could get in trouble?
Well, I wouldn't bet on him getting away scot free on this one. It might parlay into a rather lengthy suspension if the points shaving allegations that they brought up seem to be true. The issue that we're running into here is that one of the prop bets involving Porter for games on January 26th and March 20th, um, well, um, he he left a couple of games with injury and illness, which might have negatively affected the prop bets in general. So they're looking at whether or not he's going to be, he was trying to fix things and change odds. Um, as part of a daily report to users on betting results, DraftKings Sportsbook said that under reporters, three-pointer was the biggest money winner for bettors of any NBA player props from games that evening. Um, that was on the January 26th game. Um, on March 20th against the Sacramento Kings, he played just 3 minutes before exiting because of what the Raptors say was an illness and did not return. He didn't score after attempting 1 shot and had 2 rebounds. Sports books had his over under set at about 7.5 points and 5.5 rebounds. Um, those two particular bets were the biggest money makers for DraftKings on those two particular nights.
Wow.
So there's a little suspicion that something hinky might have been going on there.
Well, let's hope not. Let's look at the Dodgers. Dave Roberts is happy. There's no longer a buffer between Shohei Ohtani. Apparently, his interpreter may have
Yeah,
been.
his friend Otani read a lengthy statement alleging Mizuhara crafted a web of lies to hide a gambling addiction and brazen theft of approximately $4.5 million in order to pay for that eviction. Um, Dave Roberts, who's the Dodgers manager, said the team isn't exactly sad to see Mizuhara gone, uh, based on just on his merits as an interpreter. Roberts says he believes the loss of Mizuhara will be a plus for the Dodgers from a baseball standpoint, calling the interpreter a buffer between teams and players.
A buffer.
The idea is, because he's gone, it's going to help relations internally because there's no longer a buffer zone between Otani and the rest of the team because Mizuhara might have been softening or changing the interpreting that he was doing. Shohei now has to engage more with his teammates while they look for a new interpreter for him, so that is going to improve things. So Mizuhara was replaced by Dodgers employee Will Ireton, who previously translated for Kenta Maeda from 2016 to 2018. Since then, Ireton has been working in the Dodgers baseball ops department, most recently as a manager for performance operations.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing stuff, let me tell you. Let's go to the Blue Jays, and, well, they're gonna start with a couple of relievers on the shelf.
This is one of those things that you don't want to see. Um, but Jordan Romano and Eric Swanson are expected to begin the season on the IL. Um, Romano's been dealing with right elbow inflammation. Swanson, who's one of their top setup guys, has been slowed by right forearm inflammation. With opening day this Thursday at Tampa Bay, Schneider says that it's reasonable to say that Romano and Swanson probably will start on the injured list. The good news is Kevin Gossman pitched 3 strong innings Monday against Pittsburgh in his Grapefruit League debut. So that's a positive sign. And Jose Barrios looks to be firing on all cylinders when it comes to the home start.
Absolutely. Let's go over the NFL, and the Steelers apparently might be signing the all-time kickoff TD leader, Cordarrelle Patterson. There's some rules that have changed that may have impacted on the decision, Eric.
That's very true. There was also rumor running around that the CFL could potentially be considering these sorts of changes as well. The NFL is adopting an XFL style rules change, and here's how it's going to work. So the kicking team is still going to kick from their own 35-yard line, but all players, save for the kicker, will be lining up at the opponent's 40-yard line. Meanwhile, at least 9 members of the receiving team have to line up between the 30 and 35-yard line, with a maximum of 2 returners being in between the end zone and the 20-yard line. All of those lined up players, those ones up on the 40 and the players in between the 30 and 35, cannot move until the ball lands or is caught by a receiving player. Another part of the rule change is any kick landing in the landing zone between the goal line and the 20-yard line has to be returned. You cannot call for a fair catch. You've got to grab it, you've got to run it. If a kick bounces from the landing zone into the end zone, it has to be returned or downed for a touchback to the 20-yard line. If a kick lands short of the landing zone, that would mean it'd be in the buffer zone between the 20-yard line and the 40-yard line. The receiving team gets the ball back at their own 40. If a kick lands outside of that receiving zone between the end zone and the 20-yard line or goes out the back of the end zone, the receiving team gets the ball at its own 30-yard line. Yeah, it does sound complicated, but if you divide the field up into zones, it makes a little bit more sense. What I think they're trying to do here is mitigate the risk to players from offensive players who have been running from their own 40-yard line, just cutting through them like a scythe through wheat. But it also is going to mean that you're going to need special teams players who are going to be able to run the ball back.
Well, it's funny because it almost seemed like it's becoming less and less of a desire to have kickers return kicks. But this basically is, I don't know. It sounds like it's almost like an about face when you look at football in the U.S. I'm talking about NFL football.
Mm-hmm.
In the Canadian Football League, one of the most exciting plays during the game is the kickoff return. We've seen so many return completely all the way back that it's accelerated the excitement level at football games. So, well, we'll see how it affects it. I mean, a lot of changes do change things for the positive. It wouldn't be a surprise if it worked out well for the NFL. And it's good that they're looking outside their own little myopic world, right? And we just talked about, politically speaking, critically think and or think outside the box. Well, apparently that's what the NFL is doing because they're looking in a leagues as they have done over the years, looking in the box that is the Canadian Football League, and now they're looking at spring leagues in the U.S. as a way to make decisions. Let's go over to the National Hockey League and let's talk about the Habs, and they beat the Avalanche, Aaron.
Yeah, this was what sort of moment for me. Sam Montembeault made 27 saves. Nick Suzuki and Joel Armia scored for the Canadians, who actually snapped Colorado's 9-game win streak. They've won consecutive games for the first time since January 15th to the 17th, and have now swept the 2-game season series from the Avs. Um, St. Louis Martin was behind the Montreal bench after missing 4 games to be with his family. His 16-year-old son Mason got hurt during a youth hockey game and then suffered complications from the injury and was hospitalized. The Canadians did go 1-2-1 with assistant Trevor Letowski handling the head coaching duties, but I think it's safe to say that a lot of them were happy that St. Louis was back.
Calgary hockey fans were a little confused in the last game that was played against the Blackhawks. A guy named Dickinson scored twice to lead the Blackhawks over the Flames. Calgary has a football coach and an assistant, a consultant actually, named Dickinson. Spelt differently, though, I got to say.
Dickinson with an E. But yeah, Jason Dickinson is now a 20-goal scorer for the first time in his 9th NHL season. It's another that means a lot to him because he's never cracked 10 goals before in the NHL. He scored twice. Maple Leafs legend Peter Mrazek had 40 saves, and the Blackhawks beat the Calgary Flames 3-1. Seth Jones also scored for Chicago, and Joey Anderson had 2 assists. Connor Bedard had his stick wrapped in pride tape, picked up his team's best 35th assist. Landon Slaggert had 2 assists for his first points in his 6th NHL game, but had a beautiful opportunity to score on pretty much an empty net, but got foiled by Mackenzie Weegar. So yeah, it's been a bit of a rough go for him, but he's still not off the schneid.
The Vancouver Canucks are so close to clinching a playoff spot. Oh, they missed a chance. They lost to the LA Kings.
It's been difficult. They've come so close to making sure that they're into the postseason, and at the same time seem to trip over their own feet. They're going to have to wait now, just because LA did their thing. Anze Kopitar scored and notched an assist. They're on a 4-game winning streak as it stands now. Blake Lizotte and Kevin Fiala also found the back of the net for the Kings, and Cam Talbot stopped 21 of 23 shots. The Canucks got goals from Lafferty and Besser and 16 saves from Casey DeSmith. It's important to remember that at this point, the LA Kings are 38, 22, and 11, and the Canucks are 45, 19, and 8. So, yeah, they're getting close, but they're not quite there yet.
Well, the Maple Leafs proved once again that they have a lot of talent. They're quite capable of dominating an opponent, but what they've repeatedly shown us from time to time is it doesn't matter how many shots they get, they're not going to score enough goals. And then they allow the other team easy goals. The game against the Devils was really the prototypical problem with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, they had opportunities that they didn't bury. They hit a few more posts, but at the same time, massive gaps on the back end cost them. And this is, something that fans have been preaching about for a long, long time. It's you got to make sure that you stay on top of it. You've got to make sure that we've got a viable defense. Maple Leafs are going to have a chance to do it all over again on Thursday when they host the Washington Capitals. So we'll have to see how that goes. Wall was all right. Jake Allen was spectacular. The Leafs outshot the Devils 25 to something in the first period. It was ridiculous. It was just fire wagon hockey, back and forth and back and forth. But there was not a lot to like about that game, at least not for the coach.
Oh boy, I was going to say, told ya. He was unhappy, wasn't he?
He was very unhappy, and I'm actually really glad that they're not muzzling him. They're letting him say what he needs to say, and I think it's something his players need to hear. He said that their performance was immature over the final two periods. Um, they trailed 2-1 against the Devils after the first period, despite outshooting them 25-10. Wall got beaten by a knuckler. I mean, it is what it is.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, it's one of those sort of things. Jake Allen actually was stellar in stopping as many shots as he did. He stopped 42 out of 45, so that's a good thing. Nico Hischier had a goal and 2 assists. Jack Hughes had 2 goals, including an empty netter, and Timo Meyer added a goal and assist for the Devils. Um, here's something that boggles my mind. The next time either Nylander or Matthews scores, those two will have combined 100 goals for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's
interesting.
nutty.
It's totally nutty, and it is. We've got a couple of minutes here, but we've got Aaron. I'm looking at somebody named Buckshot here, and I don't know if I should give him oxygen, but you know,
Hey,
uh,
it's your name on the show, Frank. Go for it.
uh,
We got a minute, so
he says if I give you $1, you give me 5 cents back. I'll be happy, right?
well, that's in reference to the carbon tax.
Exactly. Again, he's well. Anyway, uh, don't know who he is. Really don't. Um, I get what you're trying to say, Buckshot. Uh, but I think you took your shot, and there you go. And one other thing he said is, if I give you $1, you give me 5 cents. And if you give me $1, you get. And he said it twice. Wait, if someone makes 1,000 cars and sells 1,000, but if they make 2,000 cars, where does the money come from to make the extra 1,000 cars? Oh, for goodness sake! I thought we explained it. If more people can afford to buy a car, more people are going to buy a car. That's where it's going to come from. The whole point is that there's a mind shift that has to happen, and like Aaron said, we only had a minute. The mind shift has to happen is that you have to understand that that we don't have a fixed pie that we're all sharing. We create stuff and make a bigger pie. That's the point. It's about contributing to make that pie bigger and bigger and bigger, so that we all, some of us make the same amount, we don't lose anything, but other people can join us in sharing some of that pie. That's all it is. I mean, it isn't a fixed number. Aaron, for me to make $5 more, Aaron, do I have to take $5 from you?
No, no. However much you earn doesn't come out of my pocket.
It really doesn't, folks. So, Buckshot, I disagree with you. But you know what? I get your point, and your disdain or unhappiness with the way it works. I respect it, and I hope you can figure out a way to be happier. For now, the only happiness you're going to have, folks, is to know that it's over. You don't have to listen to us a moment longer. We're done, Aaron. For Aaron William Freeland, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Hang on. Okay. This show got. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Candid Frank live here on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For Candid Frank Live, other news, entertainment, and sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, read it, download it, and live it. And by the way, somebody's phoning me to tell me they found my dog.